relative to proposed bylaws 2767, 2768, 2798, and 2799. Public hearings are the public's opportunity to make representations to the board. All persons who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in those proposed bylaws. I would ask those members of the public who wish to speak to kindly commence your address by clearly stating your name. The board will not debate the matters of a proposed bylaw with individual citizens, but directors may ask you questions following your presentation. This public hearing is to listen to your views. Thus, no one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. I will call for each of the bylaws individually and complete each hearing in turn. First, we have OCP Amendment Bylaw 2767 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2768. They would amend zoning bylaw 2400 by enabling a 4.3 hectare property at 1585 Lance Road in Pritchard to maintain residential and agricultural uses within a small holding zone and to enable a second additional dwelling on the property for up to 3 years. Madam Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions?
There are no written submissions.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, either in person or via Zoom? I will call a second time if there is anyone who wishes to speak to this in person or via Zoom. Sir, if you could state your name, please.
Excuse me, it's Andy Bellog. I'm the proponent of the proposal. We are the property owners at 1585 Lance Road. After a fairly prolonged process, we have now got to this point of getting this proposal to the board for approval, so we can retain the existing mobile home on the property and to build an additional home. So my daughter and son-in-law can move there to basically take over the farm, assist me with farming operations, and to look after our family and our existing extended family. Extended family member is a person with mental health issues. Sorry.
I understand.
Housing has been a major issue for this person, and that is why the request for the extended or the TUP to enable the process to continue and for us to be able to build or put a modular home on so that we can continue the operation as it exists right now. I'll answer questions if anybody has questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the proponent? Alternate Director Bethel?
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. I'm just wondering about the time period, and is that sufficient in terms of your needs, or what's going to happen at the end of that?
The ongoing battle is with BC Housing for subsidized housing. She is a low-income person with mental health issues. As soon as housing is available, she will be moved, in which case the trailer will be vacated and demolished. Time frame, I cannot tell you. We're looking at hopefully much before 3 years, because it is another ongoing problem within the system.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the proponent? Seeing and hearing none, I will call a third and final time for any other speakers, either in person or via Zoom. Seeing no further speakers or submissions, I declare this public hearing closed. We move on to zoning amendment bylaw 2798. It would amend zoning bylaw 2400 by rezoning the lakefront portion of 3962 and 3967 Highway 97 in Monty Lake from C4 recreational commercial, to LR1 Lakeshore residential single family. The owner wishes to rebuild a single family dwelling that was lost in the 2021 White Rock Lake wildfire on this lakefront land. Madam Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions?
There are no written submissions.
Thank you. I will call a first time and ask if there is anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, either in person or via Zoom. Sir? If you could just state your name, please.
Absolutely. My name is Jay Harbottle. I'm the agent acting on behalf of Lyle and Phyllis Taylor, and I will be assisting with the reconstruction of the home that was ultimately lost due to the wildfires. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions on this matter? No? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
You.
All right, I will call a second time asking if there is anyone who wishes to speak to this matter in person or via Zoom. And calling a third time to ask if there is anyone who wishes to speak to this matter in person or via Zoom. There being no further speakers or submissions, I declare this public hearing closed. And we move on to temporary use permit bylaw 2799. It would enable a long-term rental within an additional existing single-family dwelling at 6952 Upper Lewis Creek Road in Whitecroft for a period of up to 3 years. Madam Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions in addition to those which are found in our blue folders and which had previously been circulated to the board?
There are no further submissions.
Thank you. I will call a first time to see if there is anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, either in person or via Zoom. Sir, if you'd like to state your name.
Sorry about that. My name is Darcy Franklin. I am the applicant for this particular TUP. We live at the address as mentioned there. I want to thank the board members and the TNRD staff for listening to this. I know these things can drag out, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. I've read the submissions from the other parties and do understand their concerns. I am not in a position to comment on the processes put in place by TNRD for these applications, but do understand the trepidation regarding increased density in the valley. My family and I also enjoy our rural lifestyle. And from reading some of the submissions, this seems to be a fairly strongly felt point, which, as I've said, I do understand we live in the rural areas and nobody's looking to start increasing density across small rural acreages. When my wife and I started the construction of our new house, we were 100% aware of the need to decommission the existing structure when our final occupancy had been granted and did agree to this. We have always been aware of the zoning restrictions for a second residence on a 5-acre parcel. In fact, we had removed our current renters 5 months before our temporary occupancy inspection and decommissioned the residence, so it was not habitable. It was only after this that we were approached by one of the young families working for us who were struggling to find affordable, and I need to stress adequate, housing for their young family. As outlined in my original letter, Josh is a key member of our team and someone we simply can't afford to lose. We're all facing housing and staffing issues, and this is only exacerbated living in small communities like Lewis Creek, and we work in the Sun Peaks area. It was at that time that I approached TNRD planning regarding the option of a TUP. Our area has not been immune to the current housing shortage, and in some ways it's even been more exacerbated by our transient population. We have housing, but we have very little housing that is adequate for young families. And as a business owner and somebody that wants to see a young community grow, young families are really what we hedge our bets on. So here we have a young family with 2 small children that want to live in the area. And given the fact that they have difficult time finding daycare, it therefore restricts them to 1 income, therefore making it more difficult to rent in the area and stay. This is a problem across BC. It's not unique to us. And I know that you guys have been faced with this already. The short-term solution of this TUP would put Josh and his family in a position to find an alternate solution in the area. It should be noted that this is an existing building that housed a family of 5 for several years, and we are not asking to construct a new dwelling. At the time of designing the new house, which we just finished, my wife and I did not feel the need to put in a rental suite, something which now I kind of regret we had done a coach house. But we are not asking to construct something new. This house does exist. With the board's permission, I did have 2 further submissions that were emailed to me by owners in the area, if I was able to read them.
I believe you're able to read them as long as you do not, as long as you have obtained consent from
Yes.
the writers and that you, for reasons of privacy, do not disclose their names while you're reading
100%.
them.
Nope, that is totally fine.
Thank you.
It's fine where them at here. Sorry, just finding in my notes here. I had. There we go. Good morning. I was recently made aware of the temporary use application for the TNRD from Darcy Franklin, and it's were many of my neighbors. I understand the deadline for comments passed, but I would like to make a few points. This was not brought to my attention until minutes before writing submissions had to be in. The majority of the neighborhood was also unaware of this application to the TNRD, and the majority then were denied a voice replying to the application. I understand those closest to the applicant were notified, but without signage on the property, most of us were unaware. In this area of the TNRD, newspapers used to be placed in a compartment of the mailboxes and people could grab one when picking up the mail. But since COVID, this practice has not continued and seldom we are privy to what's printed in the newspaper. So again, we have people that are frustrated by the process, and that's not something I can really comment on. This issue has divided the community and their thoughts and reactions to the application. Smaller rural areas already have their neighborhood grievances over dogs, fencing, or whatever, but does the TNRD not have to do their due diligence when it comes to disputes within the community? Darcy Franklin and his family are a great community family, and Darcy has given much to the village of Whitecroft area, and he and his business has helped many of the neighbors with various tasks. He's built a beautiful home and outbuildings, and the neighborhood has benefited in many ways, including improved the value of all of our properties. In principle, we should all be concerned about any application that allows for an increased density and a change in status, which is contrary to the existing bylaw provisions for site use. We chose to live in an area which is rural in nature, and we understand that changes to bylaws over time may allow for increased use, but once rules have been put in place, they should be abided by. However, has the second residence on the applicant's property been an issue for anyone in the past years? ? I've never heard any complaints about it, and Darcy has a valid reason for keeping it for his company worker, as the housing crisis in this area is very well known. Perhaps the TNRD should consider leaving it as a 3-year trial and then make the final decision. Maybe that would be more fair to the neighbors who are at the closest may be affected. However, the bottom line is once rules have been put in place, they should be abided by. If not, what is the value of these rules? So again, this is something that I do agree with. We have a neighbor that is concerned about increased density, and my wife and I feel the same way. We really do. One more brief submission, and this was actually being put by somebody who had written a previous letter in your package. Good morning. I've had a brief discussion with Darcy Franklin, who has submitted the temporary use permit application TUP 65. He has indicated to me that in principle, he has also opposed any further densification of the neighborhood, but he has explained the existing situation involves a current employee and his need for accommodation. Given the circumstances, we feel that if a TUP is granted, it should be limited to the existing tenant for a limited period of time so that a reasonable solution may be worked out for the housing needs of the existing tenants. We would also confirm that we remain opposed to any further densification of the neighborhood beyond the parameters of the existing bylaw requirements. So I stand here before you today saying that I do not disagree with some of the concerns of the applications put forth to you. I also agree that we do not need further densification. We are simply asking that this is, I guess, a hardship case where we really want to keep a young family living in the community while we can find a solution for them to have more adequate housing. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the proponent? Okay, I have Director Grenier and Director Sarai.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. You just mentioned reasonable period of time. What's your view of a reasonable period of time?
And that's a very good question. I mean, I know most TUPs are 3 years in length. That would probably be adequate. I wish that we all had a feeling as to what was happening with housing in our current communities, but myself as a developer and a builder, even I can't say. I will give you my word, already looking at other alternative solutions for them as a young family, trying to look for a better spot for them. But I honestly don't know how long it would take.
Thank you, Director Sarai.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And just looking at the map, I have two questions. Your closest neighbor on lot 1 that's where you are, I believe. Where's your closest neighbor and how many dwellings on that lot?
My closest neighbor would be Owen and Tracy right there, and they have one dwelling on that.
And back to the shortage, and it's just not in rural areas, it's concerning that it's gone to that stage. We in the city are hearing the same thing: housing affordability, housing attainability, just any type of safe housing. If in 3 years, and I struggle with that, even if your worker finds other accommodations, there's still going to be families and individuals that are desperate for safe housing. The 3-year term, is that just because you want to help out your worker, or do you want to actually, with the support of TNRD, do you actually want to help the housing availability?
If there was a way to rent that residence long-term, we'd be very open to it. We're not doing this for financial reasons. We would love to have it rented out. However, this is literally to keep a young family in the community. And I stress that affordable and adequate are two different things. And we ran into this with an application with the city of Kamloops for rezoning on a 15-unit building about 9 months ago. We can do our best to make things affordable, but the issue is even the housing that's out there, it is not adequate for a young family. We as a company actually at Sun Peaks own rental properties, and we rent them out to people that are transient workers, lifties, things like that. And it provides a great resource for that in the community. They are not rentals for a young family with 2 small children. We're very blessed that this particular piece of this house that's on our existing property, it's actually the original Heffley schoolhouse. It was renovated years ago by British friends of ours who had them and their 3 small children for years, and then they unfortunately moved back to England. We're very blessed that we have a residence there that has a yard to it, open area, and it is out of the way. It's not really affecting, in my opinion, anybody close by. I just want to stress that when we started this process, we had decommissioned the house. I abide by the TNRD rule and the stipulations that were put on our permit. We were never trying to be nefarious or underhanded. I actually sit on a board of hardship variance with TNRD and have for a few years now, where I'm one of the guys that assists in adjudicating some of these situations where people have perhaps built without a permit or there's an encroachment issue. So we come here open-handed, trying to do this the correct way and be transparent on it.
Thank you very much. I have Directors Getz, Alternate Director Beppel, and Director Stamer. Director Getz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I come from a community that was flooded out. 900 people were affected, 240 are still out. So for me, any kind of rental that is available to help someone out is a cherished product. You're talking about your closest neighbor. How close is your closest neighbor?
Tracy, you guys are, well, we border the property, but your house is 400 feet away. Yeah. Their house is just over the giant dirt bike track that we built for all the kids. So they're just on the other side of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and the reason I'm asking is because I'm from a small city, not rural. So my neighbor is like 12 feet away. So
No.
I was just wondering how close your neighbor was and the densification I can see by the map. So I thank you for your presentation and your time. Very well articulated. I thank you. You answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alternate Director Beppel?
Thank you. So the current house is empty?
No, we're in our new house that we built on the property, and
Yeah.
we've actually only been granted conditional occupancy. We had a couple outstanding seasonal items with the building department to finish off. And Josh and Alexa are sitting over there. They are in the schoolhouse at this time.
Okay, so, and I guess a 2-part question. How long have they been in the schoolhouse? And has anybody had any complaints to you about them being there since they've been residents in the neighborhood?
They've been in about 4 months, 5 months. I've kind of lost track. They've been in maybe 4 or 5 months. I can't remember, to be honest. And again, they were allowed to stay in technically because we haven't obtained our final occupancy. We're trying to get that about the next 6 weeks with a couple seasonal issues. To be honest with you, I have heard no complaints. I don't know if anybody has phoned in at TNRD, but nothing's come back to me. Thank you.
Director Stamer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is to yourself and also staff. you mentioned numerous times in this presentation about the need for your employee to have housing. Why wouldn't that be added to the TUP where we've got, it's not going to be eligible for short-term tourism accommodation? Why wouldn't that be added to the TUP as well?
And I'd have no issue with that. Yeah, we have no desire to do nightly rentals or VRBO on our property. Zero desire at all.
So I guess we'd get clarification from staff after this process.
Does anyone have any other questions for the proponent? Thank you very much for your presentation.
And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Was there anyone else who wished to speak during this first request for speakers? Sir?
Hi, I'm Josh Smith. I am living in the schoolhouse at this time. Darcy said pretty much everything I was going to say, but just that me and my young family live there and we're raising our kids in the community, and my sister lives up there and she has 2 young kids, and it's just really nice to be so close, and it's a really good community, I feel, for my kids to grow up in. There's just lots of outdoor activity, and to be able to build homes with Darcy's company in Sun Peaks has just been like a dream job for me. So it's really, it would really suck to have to come back. And honestly, moving up there, when we moved up there, we weren't in the schoolhouse right away. We rented in Whitecroft, and I mean, it was cheaper than in town, but not enough. So it just, it's like I had no choice. There's either come back and maybe move back in with the parents or something like that. But it's just, there's just no way to do it if Alexia, my wife, isn't working, but with the 2 kids and the shortage of childcare, especially in Sun Peaks and in Kamloops, it's almost all pointless. She could work, but it would just barely pay for the childcare. So where we are right now is it would just be really great if we could stay, because it's a big help for us in our young family. It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about that.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? No, thank you very much for your comments.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to call a second time for anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, either in person or via Zoom. Sir?
Hello, my name is Thomas Mikes. I live in the area. I'm 2 doors down from Darcy. And I send in a submission of opposition to this idea. I understand the capacity of due to Sun Peaks not having enough residences for rental. My main concern is the zoning bylaw for this residence, and the fact that it doesn't fall within the zoning bylaw. And that's my main concern. Because as one property does this, there's going to be another one and another one and another one. We're in a farming community, and that's my stance. So if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have a clarification question for staff, and I know we have encountered this before, but by agreeing or disagreeing to any of these, when it comes up that time on the agenda, we are not setting a precedent. It means that every case is judged on its own merits. So because we say yay or nay once, does not follow then that everything that follows of the similar nature will have the same answer. They're all judged on their merits. So I just wanted to confirm with staff. I see heads nodding, so.
Absolutely, that's the case, and that's why they have this process, each of them.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Director Grenier, do you have a question for the gentleman who just spoke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask you, is there any reasonable period of time that you would think would be appropriate under what you've heard today?
I would say a year would be plenty enough to find another residence for the rental.
Director Hamer Jackson?
Yeah, knowing that this is a separate incident, would you want to change your thoughts?
As long as it doesn't go past the 3-year that they're recommending, I don't want to be standing here in 3 years going through the same scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sarai.
I sort of answered my question, but I'm just struggling if his employee can't find other adequate housing in the 3 years. And it's the same family that's there and say it goes to 5 years, would you still be okay with it? Knowing that this isn't what, as you described, opening up the floodgates, and everybody's gonna do it. There will be a timeline from hearing Mr. Franklin that is supporting this employee. So if it takes 3 to 5 years, would you be open to that?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
I will call a third time to see if there is anyone who wishes to speak to this matter, either in person or via Zoom. You could state your name, please.
Sure, it's Barb Cooper Schmidt Linder. I live actually directly, I'm the other neighbor on the other side, but a little bit further away than their direct neighbors. And actually, our property falls probably within the same sort of zoning restriction as Darcy and Laurie's from a size perspective. We're an AF1, but we're just over the 5 acres. And I know that just recently there has been some amendments done to the bylaw to allow for additional homes on, I believe it's 4 hectares or more. So I just wanted, to sort of speak to that. We're the same size. I'm absolutely sensitive to the family's position. The schoolhouse has been there for forever since I moved there. We bought our property in '96 and built our home. We do have a suite. When we built our home, we do have a suite. We don't always have it occupied. So I mean, I would say we're not directly affected. We're sort of a little ways away and around the corner. Again, my concern is more, the principle and the recent amendments to the bylaw that doesn't allow for 2 homes on that size of a parcel. If I was to apply for a building permit in the near future, I would be denied on those grounds with the same size property. However, I do, like I said, I am sensitive to the needs up in Suns Peaks, but I think that it should be possibly restricted to the family that is in that home currently. And, a reasonable amount of time, that is a tough one to answer. What is a reasonable amount of time? I would say up to 3 years, or 3 years or less would be ample. And I think then maybe, whether it's a TNRD or Sun Peaks, we need to seriously look at how families, such as the family that is not in that home, how they're able to approach, affordable and housing that fits their needs. So, but I think the recent changes to some of the bylaws may have been made to address that. I'm not sure. So that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions? Did anyone else wish to speak to this? I did see another hand go up. It's all right. We're very friendly. You could state your name, please.
My name's Tracy Munson, and we are the direct neighbors, the only ones really like right there beside this property. And we, as you'll see in a letter that was written when the application went in, my husband and I wrote to say that we really are okay with this coming in, and we literally share the fence. So and to this day, for the 4 or 5 months that they have been in there, it hasn't increased noise for us. It hasn't affected us in any way. And so I just think if we're able to come together as a community to be able to help a family stay there longer, I think that's what we need to go to, because we are communal beings and we really need to help support each other. And so my husband and I both support this going through as a temporary to help this family. Also, we own a construction company ourselves, and getting employees right now is quite difficult with the construction industry for many different reasons. And so I think also just having that opportunity for him to stay where he is employed is super important for our little community up there, and keeping the work going up there for the locals that are there as well that need that service. And so, yeah, we are for it. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you very much for that. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Bobby Lyle, and I'm an owner of a business in Sun Peaks as well. And the same issues that Darcy faces with his challenges with finding houses for his employees is definitely something that we face daily with finding housing for our employees. It's not abnormal for us to have employees living within the walls of my home just to keep our businesses operating. So to me, it seems like we have to be compassionate and creative with our housing in order to make it work, and to be having a perfectly viable house sit empty seems a little silly when we're struggling to house our employees. So I'm all for Darcy housing his employees in his house, and I live about a half a kilometer away.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? And is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this? Sir?
My name's Wade Marshman. I live on 6289 Upper Lewis Creek Road. I have no issues with what Darcy's asking for. It's Alexia and Josh are good people. I know them personally. It's not like they're asking to build a new house for them, just let them use what's there. And yeah, I don't have a problem with it whatsoever.
Thank you very much, sir. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
And is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this issue? Seeing no more hands and no one moving, I will declare there are no further speakers, so I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you, everyone, for your input. All right, and with the public hearing over, we move to regular board meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, which I call to order. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities, excuse me, across our vast regional district. Today, we are located on the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwépemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc and respect the territory and lands on which we gather today. Chair's announcements. Yesterday, March 8th, was International Women's Day. People around the country came together to celebrate International Women's Day, a global day annually that recognizes and celebrates women's social, economic, cultural, and political achievements. The day allowed us to reflect on the progress towards achieving gender equality and to celebrate the women of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, our staff and board members alike. Yesterday was a day of unity, celebration, and reflection, and we celebrate the women of the TNRD. No, yes, we do.
And you're running the show.
Exactly. Sisters are doing it for themselves. Great song. We have an update from the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library. The TNRL has big plans for spring break. So from March 18th to April 8th, the TNRL will offer science and technology-based programming and take-home activity kits, including experiments. Parents, you're being warned right now, for kids age 6 to 12. Youngsters age, excuse me, 3 to 12, who complete the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, building challenges will be entered to win a STEM prize. Also available are CAN code coding workshops at the Kamloops Libraries from March 20th to 30th in partnership with TRU and School District 73. So for more details, you can go to the website at tnrd.c or tnrl.ca. Operations update, the inaugural meeting for the Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee was held yesterday, March 8th. Congratulations to Director Hayward for being elected chair and Director Houghton being elected vice chair. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. And now I have a note here that says insert Chair Roden's update. All right. So attended the LGLA workshop last week in Kelowna. It was great to see so many of my fellow directors there. And I am obligated to say that on March 2nd, CAO Hildebrand and I took part in a panel that looked at regional districts, what they are, why they are, and what they do. If you missed it, you missed the highlight of the entire event, she said without hyperbole. But no, it was an excellent session, very much enjoyed it. And I think it was interesting to learn more about regional districts, just why they're there and what they do. So I'd like to welcome two alternate directors who are in attendance today. We have alternate director Beppel is attending on behalf of City of Kamloops Director Middleton, and we have Director Karpak.
He's absent.
No, we do not have Director Karpak. I stand corrected. Unfortunately, City of Kamloops Director Newstater could not be here today. Yes, that is the empty chair beside Director Bass. I see it now. Upcoming meetings and events. March 17th, we have our strategic planning session. March 29th, Utility Services Committee. March 30th, Hospital District Board meeting at 10 a.m. And on March 30th, regular board meeting at 1:30 p.m. Please note that the Finance Committee meeting was moved from March 8th to April 19th, 10 a.m. Directors appointed to this committee should have already received a calendar invite for the meeting. The agenda will be sent out approximately 1 week before the meeting. And today in your blue folders, you will have any mail that might be addressed to you and 5 written submissions regarding temporary use permit number TUP 65, which you also received via email a couple of days ago. Additions to or deletions from the agenda, are there any? No, then we move on to the minutes of the regular board meeting for February 23rd.
So moved.
Director Stamer and Sao, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing and hearing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We move on to section 7, bylaws from public hearing, item 7.1. Director Houghton.
Just out of point of order, Madam Chair, these bylaws and these types of things that are coming from an EA area director in their area, I just think would be appropriate instead of a run to get your hand up to get this meeting over, which I've sensed in the past, that the director from the area involved move the bylaw in their respective area. And with that, I'd like to move 7.1.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second? Director Sarai, discussion. So this is recommendation 1 on item 7.1 that South Thompson Valley and Pinintan Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2767/2022 be read a third time. No discussion? On the question then, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We have a second recommendation. Director Ranta, Director Blackwell seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried, and we have a third recommendation. Director Blackwell and Director Getz. Any discussion? Director Stamer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. To staff, as noted in the public hearing, there was a question I had about why the short-term or the employee only wasn't added to the TUP.
So this is a similar application, but this application that we're voting on, or you're voting on now, is on Lance Road. However, I can answer that question now because it would apply to both of them.
I'm sorry, my mistake.
Basically, the rule is short-term rentals aren't allowed because they're not listed as a permitted use. Can we add it to, I guess, strengthen the case that they're not allowed? Absolutely, we could add that. But you know, it's not a permitted use unless it's expressly stated, is what I'm saying. That's the way bylaws and temp permits work. But absolutely, it would add emphasis for the other TUP 65.
Are there any other questions on recommendation 3? Director Bethel?
There was comments and questions about whether they could restrict the temporary use permit to a specific tenant, which maybe staff could confirm, but I would think that that's not within our jurisdiction to make that restriction. It's not, we're not on 7.3.
We're on the one on Lance Road. However, this one is similar because the temporary use permit is for a given specific family member until that member finds a position in assisted living through somehow. And we do actually stipulate that it is, do we not? For the occupant. We don't name the occupant, but we say for the current occupant. And a temporary use permit, unlike a zoning bylaw, can name an occupant. Just like a housing agreement can name a specific occupant and not somebody else.
Director Hamer Jackson?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, even it's a 3-year deal, so even if, you know, let's say that employee left and had to get another employee, I don't think that would be the end of the world, would it? No, that's what I'm talking, sorry, I'm talking the other one, sorry.
So does anyone else have any comments on temporary use permit 66, which is for the property owner who would like to keep their elderly relative on the property in a secondary dwelling until they can find assisted living accommodation? Director O'Reilly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an overall general comment is that I would like to applaud the applicant for coming forward today to bring this and doing this the proper way. What we know in the city of Kamloops is that approximately 90% of secondary suites are not permitted and are not illegal, and they are illegal. To me, that scares me a lot more than issuing TUPs for temporary things. And we know that we talked about adequate housing today. While in the same breath, we need to look at safe housing, because there's a lot of things that are not safe that people are just putting up instead of coming up to the podium and asking for permission. They're waiting for it to potentially be enforced. So big kudos to the applicant for coming here today. And thank you for stating your case. And I hope more people will be able to come in front of the PNRD and say, yeah, this is what we want to do properly, safely by the code to keep our family members living in your site. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or discussion on recommendation 3, item 7.1? Seeing and hearing none on the question, then all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is passed unanimously, it looks like. Thank you very much. We move on to item 7.2.
I'd like
Director
to
Houghton?
move 7.2, Madam Chair.
Do I have a seconder? Director Sarai? Thank you. And we have one that one recommendation. Does anyone have any discussion, questions, comments? Director Stamer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, Director O'Reilly brings up a good point, and the reality is we know we have a rental crunch in our area. And I think honestly, if the proponent is willing to have us add the employee portion to the TUP, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that. To possibly alleviate any concerns in the community, and as well for that 3-year period. Yes, they have the opportunity to extend it for another 3 years, but I think that that would be a fair compromise.
Well, this is actually regarding this, item 7.2, the recommendation is regarding the rebuilding of the house in Monty Lake.
Can I just excuse myself from the meeting?
It's third time's the charm, Director Stamer, so, well, I will just ask you to wait for just a moment here, so this is 7.2, this is the proponents who wish to rebuild a home that was destroyed in the White Rock Lake wildfire in 2021. So do we have any discussion on this? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Item 7.3, Upper Lewis Creek Road, Whitecroft, which I understand it's a property with an old historic schoolhouse on it. So first of all, we do have a recommendation. So move the recommendation, Director Hamer Jackson, second, Director Blackwell. So we have a recommendation, and does anyone like to speak to it? Director Stamer.
What a coincidence. Are we sure? No, seriously. Sorry, I thought we'd already gone through it, not doing it twice, but I think it's a fair compromise. Specifically with some of the concerns that the residents had. I think it's a fair compromise. The owner of the property was willing to add that to the TUP, and I think in good faith, we could do the same.
Thank you very much. I have Director Rain and then Director Houghton.
No, I just wish to say, I think there were a lot of familiar faces in that crowd. There is an employee housing crunch in Sun Peaks, no question about that. Unfortunately, I wish I could say we have all the answers and we'll have this all fixed up in 3 years' time, but I think it's unrealistic. In fact, we're struggling right now with one project to bring in non-market rental housing and financing and everything else with it. So I just really wanted to make sure the board is appreciative that housing is at a premium in some peaks today, and affordable and adequate housing is not available.
Thank you, Director Rain. Director Houghton.
Yeah, just out of point of order again, Madam Chair. On this amendment or this temporary use permit, should Director Morris be the one moving that, like I asked? Is that the proper way, or?
No, it is entire, I understand the desire of directors to move or second a motion which is particularly dear to their heart or pertains to their area, but it's up to directors themselves whether they wish to be the first one with their hand up or not. Okay, I've got Director Hamer Jackson and then Director Blackwell.
My question's the same as it was about 5 minutes ago. And it would be that if that employee left and it's a 3-year deal, would it be a big deal if it just stayed in place and another employee moved in there,
Ms. Sadilkova?
That's a decision of the board. It's a political decision. The TUP can name the current occupants, that family, or it definitely, the TUP it's written is for long-term rentals, not short-term rentals, so it can't flip every week or weekend. But it's up to the board whether they want to, and the TUP can be amended easily. Of course, we would amend it before it gets signed. There was one other thing, 3 years. So I want to just remind folks, 3 years under legislation is the max. It can be for any term. And a TUP can be renewed once. And that would go back through this process. So there's no way that staff can somehow renew it separately.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Director Blackwell.
Yeah, just 2 quick comments. First, I think it's great irony that we're talking about housing somebody that builds housing. That's part of it. And to the point of order, it's items may come to the board that may occur in a particular zone that we're in, or electoral area or town, but that does not automatically mean that item would be supported by the person representing that zone. So that's another thing to consider in that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Bethel?
Thanks. And I'm just, so I'm clear. Well, I support the recommendation as presented, which is not to name a specific individual to be in the housing. The owner of the property is in close proximity, and I think that they have the best idea of who would be a good tenant to be their neighbor. And I think it would be too onerous for us to oversee in any case. So I'm just confirming that we're still just debating the original recommendation, right? We have not put any restrictions on who's the tenant.
No,
Which
we
I would
have
not
not made any
support.
amendments to name a tenant. That's something that people merely floated as an idea that might be a
Right.
possibility.
And the 3 years is also very reasonable.
I have Director Grenier and then Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair. We heard from the proponent, we heard from the opponent that 3 years seemed to be a reasonable period of time. And I think that if there was a need beyond 3 years, that the proponent could come back and make the case again at that time in 3 years. The other thing I am mindful of, when you sign a deal with the TNRD or any other organization, you would like to abide by that deal that you signed. We do have an affidavit that said that this was going to be dealt with. So I think a reasonable response here is to find that common ground, that 3 year three, and make the case in the third year if the problem persists. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. And Director Sal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to, I would like to start by saying that I am in support of this TUP, but going with what Director Grenier just mentioned, middle ground, I think that's important as well. That there to recognize that there were opponents to this TUP. That I understand, Director Bethel there. That we don't want to be overly onerous, but at the same time, I think we should address some of the concerns of the opponents. That we do put some sort of limits to it that addresses the concerns of the opponents of the TUP. That's just my comment.
Director Hall.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, just on the 3 year TUP. It says that they have potential for a 3 year extension. The word potential has got my interest, because does that mean they have to come back to the board and reapply?
Yes, they would have to. We would essentially be rerunning this entire episode again.
It's not automatic.
So the same.
I think we should ask, I think 3 years, and it could be extended for another 3 years.
But they would have
At
to.
that point, at 6 years, you might have to come back to a process like this.
No.
If you're going to be on.
Yeah, it is 3 years, then it goes back through this process back to you. It can't be renewed by staff. And so TUPs, we're seeing more and more of them. And for a variety of reasons, historically, TUPs were created as a test run instead of zoning, because if you give somebody zoning, they're grandfathered. A TUP can be withdrawn, or it can be not like it can just run out. So that's why they're a good tool.
So Director Sal, just going back to you, I understand that you wanted to acknowledge at least the concerns of the opponents. So did you wish to propose any amendment, or are you content to leave it with the 3 year term and the occupant being the people who are in that secondary building?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the clarification. No, I am not in favor of making any more amendments to it. Thank you.
I'm just doing my due diligence here. Didn't want you coming up to me afterwards and saying, I wanted to change that. All right, so do we have any other questions or comments on TUP 65? Director Getz?
Thank you, Measure. Just a little bit of clarification. Let's say Director Sal did make the amendment and we passed it that it would stay for 3 years for the people that were actually in it. If they decided to stay a year and a half and they left, would the TUP end at that time, or would it just stay empty for the next year and a half?
It would run out, and unless they came back and reapplied, it would just run out and it would have to be decommissioned to be an accessory building or demolished.
Director Stamer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, again, as I mentioned, the third time,
No,
fourth time. I still think it's important, and I'd like to do an add to the motion is that we put employee down in the TUP, so that if these employees, this employee end up finding alternate housing, the proponent still has the opportunity to bring in another employee, because I'm sure he's got more than one employee, to that same opportunity for this specific TUP. So that I would like to make that motion and see what the rest of the board feels on that.
All right, so we are amending the recommendation to add a stipulation to the effect that it will refer to employees. The temporary use permit will extend for 3 years as long as an employee is living in it. Okay. So that amendment has been moved and seconded, so I will entertain discussion on the amendment. Director Rain.
Yeah, we're saying employee, but employee of Mr. Moranti or any employee?
Property
owner.
Yeah, although he, yeah. I mean, he has a company, but obviously he or his company. Just make sure it's clear.
If I may, Madam Chair, he specifically mentioned it about 3 different times, that was the reason why he was doing this in the first place, was for his employees.
All right, thank you. And I have Director Bethel and Director Onslow.
I don't support the amendment. I think it's too much oversight by government to dictate the relationship between a landlord and a tenant as to whether one is working for the other, or maybe they stop working for him and they still want to stay in the house, or who knows? It's just too onerous. I don't support it.
Thank you very much. Director Onslow.
I as well don't support the amendment, and I feel that we're not honoring the concerns of the opponents, who really, their concern was that they were sympathetic to the family that is living in there, not necessarily to the employer. And I think if that family were to find housing that was affordable and would just find additional housing, the neighbors are not going to want to see another group of people move in. So for that reason, I don't support it on the fact that it's for employees. It's more specific to that particular family and employee.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything they wish to say regarding the amendment? All right, so we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, which is to note that the residence can be occupied by employees of the owner. All those in favor of that amendment. We've got Directors Sarai, Rain, Stamer, Bass, Grenier, Getz, Houghton, and Hayward in favor of the amendment.
Yeah.
Oh, one more. O'Reilly. Oh, Morris. Sorry. All right, and Hamer Jackson, you're in favor as well. All those opposed to the amendment. All right, we have Directors Stankey, O'Reilly, Onslow, Hall, Smith. Sorry, that's just sounded odd. Rhoda, Laird, Ranta, O'Connor, Bepple, Sow, Thorpe, Graham, Lepso, and Blackwell. I missed anyone? The amendment is defeated, so we are back to the original recommendation. Are there any more comments about that? Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I would, I guess, propose an amendment that says that the TUP would be issued for 3 years without the right of renewal, so that we can recognize that there was a concern by the opponent that this was just a continuation. So that I'll make that motion for amendment that the TUP be issued for 3 years.
It'd be issued for 3 years with no possibility of it being renewed at the end of that term.
They would come back and make a proposal at that time if that was still necessary.
That's what will happen anyway.
I recognize that, but I also think that the opponent came here wanting to see that we were dealing with the notion that when a deal is made with the TNRD signed affidavit, that somehow be recognized and not just overlooked by renewals and that sort of thing.
Sorry, the renewal process is exactly the same as what we went through today. Am I correct, Ms. Sadilkova, or am I missing a piece of the puzzle?
No, that's correct.
So if they wanted to renew, they would have to come back. There would have to be public hearing. There would have to be the chance for opponents to come and have their say again. So it would basically be a carbon copy of today, although not necessarily with the same outcome.
Thank you.
So do you still want your amendment
I'll
to?
withdraw that.
Okay, thank you. Director Rain?
Sorry, just point of clarification. On the second renewal, that requires a public hearing, or is that not just a board meeting?
So if I may, just to clarify, the board can absolutely in future, it'll still be this board, deny a renewal, but you can't pass a resolution that states somebody doesn't have a right to apply. They have a right to apply. You have the right to deny or approve. Just want to clarify that first. I think they'll hear loudly that they're probably not going to get a renewal, so I doubt that they'd come back. Second, yes, there would. And because not all temporary use permits have public hearings. It depends on whether it's in an official community plan area. So most municipalities have OCPs, so they don't need to do a TUP via a bylaw and a public hearing. They can just do it through a mail out. So no ads in the paper and no public hearing. Then it's kind of like a development permit, or pardon me, development variance permit. TUP in this case, unless this area is put into an OCP, which I don't think is going to happen, it will have to come back through the whole process, bylaw and public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Sadilkova. Director Bass.
Just a minor point, but several of the submissions complained about the fact they weren't aware of it. And with all respect to Director Kelly or Director Hall, who used to be my boss, the newspaper's not terribly reliable. So I'm wondering if there's a better way to ensure, particularly in rural areas, that people know, so we don't have them showing up angry because they didn't know or till they found out from their neighbor.
So we always, am I through the chair, can I speak to this? This could be the subject and has been the subject of a whole presentation at committee. There will always be people who didn't know, even if we send them something. And I believe it was Director Bass under the previous term moved and we doubled our mail out area. I remember. So our mail out area doubled. We will be looking at public hearings and notifications because the Local Government Act has changed in that regard in future, and that especially with ads in the paper are no longer absolutely required. I think we should still use them, but all that can come back, and that may be the best time to discuss that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And are there any more comments or discussion on the recommendation, which is back to the way it was?
Yeah.
Just to clarify the story so far. Any more comments or questions? Seeing none on the recommendation regarding TUP 65, all those in favor of the recommendation? Thank you. Any opposed? None opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We move on to item 8.1, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Bylaw number 2803. We have 3 recommendations.
Recommendation. Second.
Just a point, are we allowed to move them all at the same time or must they be done individually?
They should be done individually, and it allows for discussion as well.
Thank you very much. All right, pardon me? Okay, so moved and seconded in recommendation 1, we have Director Bass.
I don't want to be wordsmithing, but in 6.1, what does the verb may mean in the head may require blah, blah, blah? Because it's not shall or will. I'm just curious, if there's some
So
discretion.
through the chair, there is discretion in the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act that allows the FOI head to waive fees. All right, or charge fees depending, and that's what that refers to.
Any other comments on recommendation 1? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Move to.
That is carried. We move to, thank you, Stamer and Director Blackwell. Comments on the second recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. And third recommendation.
Second.
Director Sarai, Vice Chair Smith, does anyone have any comments about item number 3? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. All right, Agricultural Land Commission, application number ALR 216, item 9.1 for those keeping score at home. We have a recommendation. Director Laird and Director Ranta, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this item? No discussion? All right, seeing no hands in the air, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. All right, we move on to item 9.2, proposed addition to Quayout Indian Reserve number 1A. And we have 2 recommendations, and on recommendation 1, I would like to move to lay that motion on the table to be picked up at a later point in this same meeting today. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Director Morris, thank you very much. There is, this is not debatable, and there is no discussion. So all those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That is carried. That takes us on to recommendation number 2. Director Morris. Move the second recommendation regarding the meeting between the various stakeholders. Do we have a seconder for that? Director Hall, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on recommendation number 2? Director Ranta?
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sadilkova, would you like to speak to this?
This is a very, very difficult situation. Especially because it happens at a level of the federal government and the provincial government. And we are sort of minimized in the process. Absolutely, you could change the resolution, but it may not change the reality of whether there's a meeting or not. We can ask, say it's required before the board will consider support, but whether these are sent to, the additions to reserves are sent to local government as a courtesy, I believe, more than due weight on the views of the local government.
Thank you. I have Director Onslow and then Director Rain.
I agree with the language of saying that a meeting should be required prior to this board sending a letter of approval. And I would prefer to see that language instead of requested.
Okay, would you like to make that amendment then, following on Director Ranta's lead? Or Director Ranta, would you like to make that amendment?
Sure, I'll move the amendment to replace the word requested with required.
And Director Onslow, will you second that? Thank you very much. So on the amendment that recommendation two, read that a meeting be required between the chair, Area P Director, and Little Shuswap Lake Band Council. Any comments on that, Director Rain?
I'm opposed to that motion, just in that these are sensitive areas, and I think requested is a much friendlier word. Required would give us the sense that we have some authority here. I don't think we have very much authority. And I do think we want to be on friendly terms, not giving any ultimatums. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Director Thorpe and Director Sal.
I would agree with Director Rain. I think we have to be very careful how we word it. If it sounds like we're demanding something, we're going to be met with opposition.
Thank you very much, Director Sal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree with the principle that, we have to be sensitive and respectful with our language. However, I don't think we should be writing letters of support on items that we don't have the full picture of. So which in turn would kind of make us like a rubber stamp. So that's my comment.
Thank you. I believe this will be addressed when item 1 returns to the table. Your concerns will be addressed at that point. Director Hamer Jackson.
Yeah, I feel the same way, that requiring to do something might be a little bit, might be taken the wrong way.
Thank you very much. So on the amendment, which is to change the word requested to required, are there any further comments? All right, on the amendment then, which is changing the word requested to required, all those in favor of changing to required? All right, Directors Smith, Onslow, Laird, Ranta, Graham, Houghton. All those opposed? All right, that is defeated. So we return to that a meeting be requested. Does anyone have any further comments on that recommendation? Director Bethel?
When was the last time that the TNRD has met with this First Nation?
Someone?
Never.
I don't believe there's been a community to community meeting with them and the TNRD. There has been with other First Nations, but not Little Shuswap Indian Band. But I do recall we've had set in the last 10 years, including about probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had our strategic planning session at Quaillet Lodge, and the band in chief of that day did present and communicate, and there was a ceremony at that time.
Yes.
So it might make sense to start with just having a general meeting first before getting into sort of details of this sort of negotiation or discussion is sort of a bit heavy to start us the first thing that you talk to them about. So maybe it might make sense to reach out first to just have a community to community meeting.
Okay. CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. Yes, we can certainly try to accommodate that. It's timing that would be the factor that we'd have to try to get something relatively quickly, I would think, because otherwise this may move forward faster than we can meet.
That would be my concern, that while we wait for a community to community meeting, knowing how long it took to arrange a meeting between the TNRD and the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council, that this could well be done and dusted before we have even had a community to community, let alone met with them to discuss the item in question. But we would not go in with all guns blazing. It would be a respectful meeting between the stakeholders to address the concerns of TNRD residents. Sorry, Director Sarai?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Chair. The issue here isn't going in with guns a-blazing. The issue here is there's a matter come up that was initiated by the Shuswap band, not by TNRD or its neighbors. So it's not like they're not going to be aware of what the conversation is going to be. It's how you approach that conversation. And I am hoping that they're open to a resolution. But the topic has already been initiated by the Little Shuswap band, so there's no lack of what we're going to talk about.
Thank you, Director Lipso.
Thank you very much. I did have a meeting with one of the counselors from Little Shuswap on Monday, so I'm quite aware of the issue, and the Village of Chase has an upcoming meeting with 3 communities next month.
Thank you, and Director Hamer Jackson.
Yeah, and I believe this has been going on for quite a while, has it not?
Yeah.
The negotiations for the addition to reserve, because there's also with the Sconlith before, they've been marching along. That has been going on for quite a while, but the blocking and closure of the road with the gate is relatively recent. It was just last fall. Is that a while?
That's when I heard about it. Yeah, that's wow.
Is there any further discussion on item recommendation number 2? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any. Director Ranta, anyone else opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. And now I would like to take recommendation 1 off the table and bring it back to this meeting for discussion. Again, there's no debate needed, but I do need a seconder. Director Bass, thank you very much. So on the question that recommendation 1 be brought back to the table, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That is carried. So recommendation 1 is sitting there staring at all of us. Director, anyone want to move the recommendation or an amended recommendation? What, you're moving recommendation 1? That it be supported? Does it have a seconder? No, it's now back on the table, so we're waiting for someone to do something with recommendation 1. It has to be moved, or someone has to move an amended version of it. I'm easy. Nope, there is no amended version. Director Blackwell?
I need to recuse myself from this one. I just realized.
All right.
I have to state, I have just realized that I am very good friends with a property owner in this section, so.
All right, Director Bass is moving recommendation 1 as it stands for discussion. Do I have a seconder for that? Director Getz, thank you very much. Item 1 is open for discussion. Director Rain.
I would believe we should defer this discussion at this time, because we have requested a meeting, and following that meeting, we will all be better informed to make a decision. So I would move to defer.
Second.
Thank you. Just a point of order. I believe the correct recommendation or the correct move would be to postpone it rather than to defer. So I think possibly cleanest and easiest is to vote on this and have it defeated and then make a new motion to postpone.
You can actually just postpone at this point in time.
Okay.
Override.
All right, so Director Rain, you're asking that we postpone the approval of the application. All right, thank you. And does anyone second that? Whoa, okay. Director Hall, I heard you first. All right, any discussion on this? So right now the motion is that recommendation 1 be postponed. Director Getz.
Point of order, correct me if I'm wrong. When we do a motion like this, there is no discussion when we defer. It automatically, the discussion comes off the table on a deferred motion.
No, when you postpone, there is a debate allowed.
Really?
Yes.
Wish they stayed with defer.
All right, do we have anyone else who wishes to discuss this? So right now, the motion is that the application recommendation 1 be postponed. All right, no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. All right, we move on to the CAO's verbal report. I take it there will be no amendments to any of this. CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. It's pretty heavy topics to follow, but I will do my best. Just a few updates. Number one, I wanted to talk a little bit about LGLA last week and do a bit of a recap. This conference took place in Kelowna and was one of our planned events for the board, directors, and myself. The conference is very well attended by the majority of our electoral areas and a number of municipal members as well. The theme of the conference was Tradition and Tides, Leadership and Uncharted Frontier. Delegates had an opportunity to participate and learn from many great presentations, which included roles and responsibility, code of conduct, municipal finance, assessment and insurance, and a host of motivational speakers and training sessions. I believe the conference was a great success overall. The opportunity to get back in-person conferences post-COVID was very valuable. That was loud and clear. Interacting and learning from colleagues from neighboring municipalities and regional districts was also very successful. My next topic was about the community building or gas tax policy review that just happened this morning. So I had to add a few comments in here, but the policy review started this week at the EA Directors Committee this morning. We had a complete overview of the program, and since it's been in place since 2005, we had a history to take the group through. The purpose of the review is to update and evaluate the criteria and requirements for funding to ensure we're managing this program with proper controls and efficiency. Staff shared significant amount of information and had some great dialogue and discussions with the EA directors. As part of the meeting, a presentation was also given by Brant Felker, the UBCM program manager, that is responsible for the coordinating of this federal program. That was a good overview as well, and there was question and answers from that as well. The session was very informative, and I'm really happy with our outcome. I'm very happy with the discussions today, and we received some great feedback and direction from the EA directors. So staff will be incorporating this feedback we received from the group, along with information from UBCM to provide a fulsome and complete report to the policy committee, and that'll be coming up with recommendations and proposed changes to the policy on April 19. And if successful, we'll move forward to the board of directors in early May for final decision. As a side note, I think everyone in this room is well aware of our $1 billion Growing Communities Fund that was announced last Friday. This, of course, is completely separate from the gas tax fund, but is also a significant boost in our ongoing capital and infrastructure projects for the TNRD. The TNRD will be receiving $5.44 million in grant funding by the end of this month. We are still hoping for the details on how this funding can be spent, and we're hoping to get that information either this week or next week. But we will be bringing this report to the board of directors at a future meeting for some direction on how that money will be allocated. Number 3, just strategic planning session is upcoming. As the group knows, we are doing a mini session tomorrow with the EA directors to pull together some ideas in preparation for the March 17th event. This session will allow the board of directors to chart their vision over the next 3.5 years. Staff will then take that feedback and that vision and operationalize it and bring it back to the board. Just a quick reminder, and I did send an email out to everyone, the pre-survey, there was a bit of a glitch there. If you could help us out and please click on that link and complete that. That would be very helpful for the EA directors for tomorrow, and then of course for the whole group for next week. I've got a quick update for the group on our civic building renovations. So in this building and the EOC project and the library change, phase 1 is 90% complete. The contractor is anticipating turning over the second floor space on March 20th. Moving library administration and distribution will start on March 27th through April 5th. The contractor will then start on the second floor, where we're starting with offices and a emergency operations space, and we're expecting to have that back in early June. The room divider for the EOC, because we do have a large EOC space planned. We do have a back order on that retractable wall, but they are anticipating to have that in time for a July installation. We're also doing some renovations as part of that project at our Mission Flats building. This is approximately 50% complete. Framing and rough-in is complete. Drywall is in progress, and we should have that space turned over to us by April 28th. So things are moving along efficiently. And then just lastly, I just have a few miscellaneous updates. So starting with the Kamloops communication update. So I wanted to bring this up because the new board, but staff have been working closely with the staff at T-Test to start drafting a proposed MOU protocol agreement for the board's future consideration. This work started last year in discussions with our past board and was paused until the new board was in place. The purpose of these types of agreements, as you would know, is to continue to build and foster our relationships, communication, and partnerships with our First Nation communities. This is just the start of our formal relationship with the Kamloops, along with our many other First Nations across the regional district. So this is, although we've done some protocol agreements in the past, this will be one of our first formal agreements as the new board with the TNRD, and I'm excited to move this forward. Public feedback survey that Colton communicated and we've been talking about for the month of March is now closed with over 1,200 respondents, which really surprised us, which was great to see. It was open for 30 days. This was shared by us through a news release, covered by many local media outlets, shared through social media and on Facebook pages. We saw a number of responses, and they actually doubled in the last 3 or 4 days as people wanted to get their views communicated to the board. The purpose of the survey was to gather community feedback on services that residents receive or could receive that are within our jurisdiction, and to hear the priorities that the residents have for their communities of the TNRD. These results can be considered during the board's strategic planning session or considered in other situations moving forward. The survey wasn't meant to be budget specific, but maybe to help us share some opinions and thoughts about some future budgets going forward. The board was provided with a summary, I think, just this week of the data, and the report will be shared publicly in the very near future and added to our website. And then finally, our regional newsletter, and this might be new to a lot of the board members in here. So we do newsletters. The spring 2023 regional newsletter will be arriving in mailboxes next week. So that's the week of March 13th to 17th. This newsletter was started in the fall of 2022 after the board deemed it as one of their priority action items in their most recent strategic plan. As a reminder, it's a double-sided newsletter with updates on TNRD services and projects. We make different newsletters for each electoral area, and we mail it directly to our constituents. And the newsletter is also going to be available online and on our website under the regional newsletter webpage. So those are my updates for the meeting. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Thank you, CEO Hildebrand. Does anyone have any questions? No. Speak now or, all right. You're off the hook. Thank you very much for that fulsome report, CEO Hildebrand. We move on to item 10.1.2, privacy management program. We do have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Vice Chair Smith, thank you. Second, Director Ranta, was that? I heard a deep voice and that was all. All right, is there any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you very much. Item 10.1.3, zoning bylaw response to January 2023 Tobiano zoning and development issues. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. As this report indicates, I've had extensive involvement with this project and the companies that advanced it. To avoid any perceived conflict, I recuse myself from this discussion or this motion.
We do have a recommendation. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Ms. Sidilkova and her department for an extreme, thank you very much for this. I thought it was an excellent presentation. I moved here just as all this was getting started, so it was something of a trip down memory lane to see that 6 Mile Ranch sign and read about Camland's development. So thank you for putting together a very fulsome and interesting history of the development now known as Tobiano, not to be confused with the singer known as Prince. All right, so we do have a recommendation. Would someone like to move that? Director Ranta, second by Director Thorpe. Thank you very much. Discussion. No discussion on this. This is just the start of a process, of course. So where it leads is anyone's guess, but Ms. Sidilkova, did you have anything to add to what you have presented us with?
So you're correct, Chair Roden, that this is not going to happen quickly. It is an evolving project. There's a lot of construction at the project. And sometimes we are completely aware that you need the residential component there, enough of it to perhaps have other kinds of services that the residents want. And it's interesting, the more residents that there are there and the more interested parties like different developers, different owners, the more complicated a change is. And so I'm happy to say that Dan Wallace has been here 30 years? 29, close enough, 30, who's been here through a lot of this, will be able to sort of, our purpose is for accuracy and clarity of zoning. And so when we issue building permits and answer questions, our responses aren't confusing interested parties from what they're reading in their zoning. Really, it isn't a purpose to how would I say, necessarily change what's happening on the ground. It's just to fix our zoning bylaws. So we're looking at a level of detail that there's other conceptual, much bigger issues that are beyond that we may not have control over. So that's kind of, it's not going to be quick.
For speaking for myself, reading that report, I found it interesting to see how, despite the original intentions of the developers for a resort community, the Kamloops on the Lake community, it organically grew, not because anyone imposed anything on it, but the people who moved to the community decided that this was actually the kind of community they wanted to live in, not a resort community. And those of us who were on the last board will remember the discussion around the building of a convenience store / gas bar / liquor store. And some residents were in favor and some were opposed, depending on where they fell on the spectrum of, is this a resort community or is this, I hesitate to say a subdivision or a bedroom community of Kamloops, but you know, the report notes that people are now asking for the sorts of services in that community that were not envisioned as part of the original Kamloops on the Lake, but people do expect in their subdivision. Are there any comments, questions? We will be hearing a lot more about this, I'm sure. On the recommendation then, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We have the building permit activity highlights for your information and edification. Are there any questions or comments about that? Director Laird? Whoops.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting when you look at where the statistics are compared to last year. There's obviously quite a slowdown in the amount of new construction that's happening so far to date. You don't know if that's going to change, but huge slowdown.
Thank you. We move on to internal committees. We have a report from the Committee of the Whole meeting, February 24th. Are there any questions or comments regarding that? And then we have the Policy and Governance Committee meeting from February 23rd, and there is a recommendation arising out of that committee meeting.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Director Bass and Vice Chair Smith, thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Do we have any new business? Director Laird.
I'll forget to do that. Might remember one of these days. Been here for 4 years and still forget. A notice of motion for the TNRD Code of Conduct Policy be reviewed and updated for basically the municipal council and regional district boards are required to consider adopting and updating the code of conduct following a general election. So do I make that motion? Does it have to come back to another meeting, or can I submit this now for as a
CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that's already in our purview and something that we are bringing. We know we're legislated to bring this back, I think within the first 6 months, is that what you said? And it's already on Deanna's docket, and it's part of the process coming forward. So we can either go ahead with the notice of motion or just allow us to bring that back, because it is happening.
I wouldn't mind making a notice of
Sure.
motion, because there's just two items in it I want to make sure we address. One of them is our current code has no enforcement. And so if you want to misbehave, you can do it as long as you want, because there's no enforcement ability. And the other one is that each newly elected official has been able to read the policy and accept it. And also there's a signing that you have read the policy and understand what it means. So those are just the two items that I was.
CEO Hildebrand.
Sure, that makes good sense, and we'll move that forward with those recommendations. I know we all experienced that at LGLA with the Salmon Arm Code of Conduct and the presentation that we all heard. So that'll be one of the examples we bring to the board for consideration.
Thank you. Just one other comment. It was made apparent that the best time to do the review of the code of conduct is when everybody still likes everybody. And so far, I can't see that. Good. So probably the sooner the better, because we never know which way we're going to go as a large elected board. But that was the other recommendation, sooner than later.
We should have done that at inauguration.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is a notice of motion. So let's speak English here. That is a notice of motion, so it does not require a vote. So that will be coming back to us. And I had Director Sarai.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably to staff, but I just want to get support from the rest of the directors. Kamloops City Council has a youth council, student council that meets regularly and runs meetings just like a elected council does. And we have our CEO that sits in on it. We have, depending on their requirements of information, it could be a civic ops meeting, it could be a finance meeting, it could be any other department in our city. I was wondering, and I think it came up at LGLA as well, if the TNRD, we have a lot of students in our high schools that live in the rural areas that are interested in issues that affect them, and good, bad, and sensitive. And I think it'd be really neat if the TNRD did the same thing as the city does, and have a student youth council meet regularly and have their input. They are going to be the future voters and the future stewards of the lands. And I think it'd be really neat and valuable to all of us to see what their goals and their future needs are as well. I'm just wondering how I get that forward.
CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. To Director Sarai, it's something that we would certainly take on. Maybe we all could learn something from it. Who knows, right? So I think we could connect with the city. Maybe I'll talk to Mr. Trawin and just find out kind of how that's working right now, and look how we could perhaps bring that to the TNRD. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Stamer and Director Houghton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As everyone's aware, not only Mayor Blackwell and myself, but all the area directors on our Highway 5 corridor have had significant challenges in the last month or so with the amount of accidents and fatalities that we've had. The District of Barrier is drafting a letter to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to Minister Fleming in regards to some of the issues that have come up in regards to enforcement, and also revolves around out of province speeding tickets and the inability to not only receive those revenues, but actually be able to act as a deterrent. I'm going to I'll put that on correspondence for our next meeting, and hopefully we'll get support from that as well.
Thank you, Director Houghton.
Just regarding Director Sarai's comment, I think the project of a youth council would be very good for us rural directors to bring forward to our 4-H clubs in our rural areas to be part of their 4-H project. Because they have a very good learn to do by doing model. They do public speaking, they do demonstrations, and I think this would be a great thing for our future generation to incorporate into their 4-H work program.
Thank you, CEO Hildebrand.
Would anyone be opposed to a youth board? Because the city's kind of got the youth council, and we could maybe go with the youth board.
You name it whatever you need to.
Director Blackwell.
Yes, in support of Director Sarai's comments, Clearwater had a youth, we called it junior council. For many years. It fell off during COVID, and quite frankly, because the students in our high school are doing so many things that they just didn't have time for it. But we do intend hopefully to revive that. To Director Houghton's point, yes, I think 4-H and their program of public speaking and presentation would be the absolutely perfect venue to try to get interest in this from the rural communities. 4-H is absolutely amazing. I've been there for their presentations as a commentator / judge, and it's amazing what 13 and 14-year-old kids can say and come up with given the proper mentorship. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair Roden. I'd be in favor of a youth board. My question would, my daughters were both part of youth parliament when they were younger. My question would be how we would make this work with the rural communities, because we're a large distance. So how would this be feasible? That would be something we'd need to explore, I think.
CEO Hildebrand.
I think that'll just be part of the exploration. We need to figure out how this potentially could work, and this might be something we may need to build budgets to or things like that going forward if we really want to move forward. So we'll pull together the information, the board could decide the direction.
Thank you, Director Getz.
We are in the midst of forming our own youth council. So what we've done is we're having one student from NVIT, 2 from the school, and then 4 at large that might be in the area directorship. So that's how we're doing it that way. So there'll be the opportunity of everybody in the area to apply if they wish.
Thank you. Nope. Any other new business? So we can expect to see more about a youth board at a future meeting. We move on to question period. Are there any questions from the gallery? Everyone, no pressure. Yes, all one. And anything online? Do we have any online questions? No? All right, we have need of a closed meeting. If someone would like to make a motion to that
So
effect.
moved.
Director Stamer, seconder, Director Bass, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you, and we will take a 10-minute recess while we move into closed session.